Hey guys, Ziomaro here. So I was watching Skyline's video the other day about the 4 stages of a team fight. He gives some really solid advice about how a team fight should work. So if you haven't checked that out already, then check it out in the annotation or in the link in the video description. So while I was watching it, I was thinking, I wish I'd made this because it's a really good video. It's actually some really great advice. But at the end of it, I thought this is really useful to me as a Masters player or sometimes Diamond on my Smurf account. But if you're in like Silver, Gold, Platinum, and even Diamond sometimes, if you're the sort of person who watches videos like Skylines or like this one, then you're probably the sort of person who knows how a team fight should go, but maybe if you're in a lower rank, you don't know how you can make that happen with an uncoordinated team in solo queue. So that's where this video comes in. I'm gonna break down Skyline's video and his 4 different stages of a team fight and how you can go about achieving that in a solo queue game. I've said it already, but go and watch Skyline's video first, because I'm going to be using a lot of the same terminology as him. The first stage is the approach. Now in an ideal situation, what this means on attack is the tanks move up to the front line, the Reinhardt faces off with the other Reinhardt, the straight up DPS like Soldier and McCree will be just behind the tanks, and the supports will be just behind that, and the flankers will be starting to move towards a route that allows them to get an alternate angle when the initiation happens. So that's what should happen in an ideal situation. But how do you make this happen with 6 people who maybe aren't all communicating? So in this situation, let's go through each role and what you should be doing in the approach phase. So if you're the main tank as Reinhardt or Winston, then what you want to be doing is, as Reinhardt, you walk up to their Reinhardt with your shield up. You basically want to see if their Reinhardt is going to give you any ground. Because quite often if there's 6 people all behind a Reinhardt shield and the Reinhardt kind of feels like he's up at the front and he could just get destroyed any second, he might give some ground. Whereas there are some Reinhardts who may just hold their ground anyway, which actually gives you quite a good opportunity in the initiation phase, which I'll get into in a minute. As the DPS, if you're a soldier or whatever, you want to be just behind the Reinhardt, just spamming some damage into the shield or to anything that you can get some shots on. Same thing with the supports, just stay a little bit behind and just heal up anything that needs to be healed. As a flanker, depending on which one you're playing, if you're playing Tracer or Pharah, they can actually do okay shield damage. So what I would normally do is do 2 or 3 seconds of shield damage to see if you can win the shield war first and foremost. But if it looks like you're not going to be able to do that, then start moving towards a flank route. There's not an awful lot of communication to be made during this phase, but you might occasionally get someone saying, go left after the choke or whatever. Like that's the kind of communication you'll get during the approach phase. The next phase is the initiation. Now, in solo queue, this is by far the most difficult thing to make happen with an uncoordinated group of people. How you make the team initiate as a group depends on your role, and communication at this point is absolutely key. As a main tank, you have a huge role in the initiation, like you are the initiator. And for this reason, I actually think that if you're good with Reinhardt, he's a really good carry hero for lower ranks. If you can make a good initiation happen, that sets you up for a really good team fight. So as a tank, what you want to be looking for is, if the Reinhardt is holding his ground, this actually puts you in quite a good position because your shield is right next to his, you're right in his face, and you can quite easily land a good charge on him. If he backs off and takes a different route, you can go one of 2 ways. Either you can carry on going the way that you wanted to go, away from them perhaps, or you can push them into the corner that they're backing themselves into and then charge. Just before you charge, you want to communicate this to your team. So just as you're about to charge the Rein, say, I'm charging their Reinhardt, engage with me. This should hopefully encourage your team to just go ham and start doing some damage. As a non-flanker DPS, you want to be looking for the openings that your tanks make for you. So if your Reinhardt charges, just watch what your Reinhardt's doing. If he charges the Reinhardt, then you want to start laying some damage into that Reinhardt to see if you can get a kill. If your Roadhog gets a hook, then try and do some follow-up damage with it. If your tanks aren't really making an opening for you, then the best thing you can do is just try and help with the shield war. Try and just get a lot of damage into the enemy shield. As a flanker, if you've already got through the approach phase and you're in your little flank route, then there's a few things you can do. you can, on a 2CP map, on the first point, you could put a little pressure on the point, try and draw people away from the choke to give your initiators a little bit of an opening. If you've managed to flank and you feel like you've been undetected, you can tell your team, I'm in position, try and engage. Now, people aren't always going to listen to you in solo queue, so you've got to just play things by ear. If you say you're in position, go engage, and they engage, then that's perfect. You can start putting in some damage from an alternate angle and really put some pressure on people and get some opening picks. If they don't initiate, you can start poking them from behind to hopefully get some to turn around and come and get you, and then maybe your team will initiate a fight. As a support character, and particularly as Ana, what you want to be looking out for in the initiation is that Reinhardt charge. The second that Reinhardt charges, whether you're on defense or attack, you want to get your D-heal nade on the Reinhardt. That will put your team at a massive advantage. If you can get that D-heal, it's almost a guaranteed kill on the enemy Reinhardt. As Lucio, you also want to be looking for this charge or leap initiation. And at the point of initiation, you want to amp it up and speed boost to help your team get into position and get a good initiation. If you're the main tank, like I said, this puts you in a really good position where you can control when the initiation happens, when you feel like you've got into a good position to start doing that. If you're playing any other role, all you can really do is encourage your Reinhardt to move. So if you're playing Lucio, say, Reinhardt, when you're ready to charge, I'll speed boost everyone in. Or if you're Zarya, you can say, Reinhardt, just go for a charge, I'll shield you. And then, like I said, with a flanker, you want to say, I'm on the flank, let's engage. So as you can see, in this phase, communication is key. Try not to give too much fluff information, but try and encourage your team to engage when you see an opening. In solo queue, you cannot control what other people do. So the best thing you can do in any role is to try and watch your team, see how they play, and play around them. You often find within any solo queue team, there's a kind of hive mind that happens. If you see people are poking at the choke, then you kind of just have to go with that and do whatever you can to facilitate a good poke battle. If people seem to be playing quite aggressive, then you need to dive with them. You need to jump on that opportunity. So keep communication encouraging and try and take cues off what your team are doing. The next phase is what Skyline called the grind. At this point, the initiation has happened, everything's a bit chaotic, and it's a bit easy to get lost in what's happening. There are a few things you can do to help shape the battle in your favor. At this point, you've already executed your strategy, the initiation's happened, and you're in a team fight. So at this point, I like to keep communication to the absolute essentials. If you're playing a tank or a frontline DPS, you want to stop shooting the shield and start going for the flesh targets. Target prioritization is a little bit tricky, but if you're a frontline DPS or tank, you generally want to be putting damage into anything that's within range. If they're squishy DPS and healers are in good positions, then you don't want to be chasing them down if you're a low mobility character. You just want to be putting some damage into something, because it does pressure the DPS and supports on the other team to do something about it. So you may be able to force them into a bad position at some point. If you're a flanker or a mobility tank, then you should be putting some pressure on their back line. Try and listen out on comms to anything your healers say, because if they're getting harassed by something, then as D.Va or something like that, you can easily just boost back to them, put a defense matrix in their face and help keep your healer alive, which is pretty important. Constantly refresh in your mind, who should you be going for? So if there wasn't a support in a bad position at the start and you start wailing into a tank, that's okay at the beginning. But if that forces a Mercy to fly to the tank and start healing them, stop damaging that tank because they're being healed anyway and go for that Mercy. In this phase of the fight, I like to keep my communication to calling out low health targets. Because remember, if your team hasn't hit something, they don't know that it's low. So you have to call these things out. If you get a Roadhog to 100 health, they may not seem like the best target to the rest of your team, but if you've just called out that Roadhog's low, then it's going to turn people's attention to them and help you confirm that kill. So call out low HP targets and listen out for your team calling out low HP targets as well. The other great bit of communication that you can give is if your team are fighting the tanks because that's the best target at the time, but you see support go into a bad position to heal them, then call it out. Mercy behind Roadhog on point. You know, having a bit of urgency in your voice isn't a bad thing, but make sure that you're calling out who it is and where it is. Because remember, your team's going to want to focus that support who's out of position, but they need to know where they are as well. So focus on target prioritization. It's okay to kill a tank out of position, but don't tunnel vision. Make sure you're looking out for healers and squishy DPS going out of position as well and switch to them. Call out low HP targets and call out any other targets who are out of position. At this point, be wary of not dominating the team voice, because you need to allow some space for your team to call these things out as well. And quite often when you're calling out low HP targets, you'll find that your team start doing it as well. The final phase is the cleanup. This is the point where you've already got a few kills and you're just finishing off the stragglers. So you might be in a 5v2. Now, I haven't actually mentioned ultimates up until this point, because mostly if you're comfortable with your character, you know when to use an ultimate. But generally you want to be using your ultimates in the middle two phases. So you can use an ultimate to initiate. If you're a Reinhardt, you can charge and then earth shatter everyone. A Graviton can be quite a good initiation ultimate sometimes as well. And then during the chaotic grind phase, you might see a good opportunity for a Death Blossom or a Dragon Blade or something like that as well. Once you get to the cleanup phase, you don't want to be using any ultimates anymore. The only situation where you might want to do it is if one of the 2 or 3 remaining enemies uses something like an ultimate or ability that might change the flow of the fight, then you might want to counter-ult that. But generally you don't want to use ultimates in this phase. So make sure that you've got a bit of an eye on the kill feed. That will give you an idea of when you should be transitioning into this cleanup phase. There's still an order of target prioritization at this point, but the priority kind of changes a little bit when you get to the cleanup. If you're on attack, then the first thing you want to be killing is anything that is contesting the point still. In an earlier phase, you may not pick the Roadhog over the Ana, but if the Ana's trying to retreat, but the Roadhog is still on point contesting, then you want to kill that Roadhog first before you chase the Ana. If that person on point who's contesting is being healed by the Ana, then the healer becomes the priority again. Once everything on the point is killed, that's when you start chasing kills to stagger. Now, depending on which side you're on, how far you go to stagger kills will vary. As a general rule of thumb, as a defender, you don't want to take risks. You don't want to chase a kill and try and stagger if there's a risk of you dying and them getting a successful push while you're trying to come back from spawn. If you're on attack, then you can sometimes be a little bit riskier and move a bit further forward to confirm those kills and stagger deaths. How far you go isn't as simple as attack and defense though. The best example of this is probably 2 capture point maps like Hanamura. On the first point, the attackers have the spawn advantage. So as defenders, don't be risky and try and stagger deaths by chasing people into spawn. It's really just not worth the risk to you. However, on the second point, your spawn as defenders is a lot closer, so you can be a little bit riskier. But before you go and chase down that kill, just remember what role you're playing. If you're a healer, it's quite obvious you should not be going and chasing that kill. If you're a low mobility tank like Zarya, Reinhardt, Orisa, then again, don't chase the kill too far. However, if you're playing a high mobility character, then you can be a little bit riskier when you're trying to stagger those deaths. In terms of communication, just relay information to your team that they may not otherwise know. If there's someone contesting on the point, say, Lucio's on the payload, help me kill Lucio. If one of the enemies is trying to escape to regroup, but they're not quite to safety yet, then you want to call that out as well. So if you've managed to get D.Va out of mech and she's trying to escape, then call it out, say stagger D.Va. In general, the flankers and mobility characters have the biggest role during the cleanup phase. They want to be prioritizing, should they be chasing a straggler, or is there someone still contesting, in which case they need to be going back and killing them first. I hope this video was useful to you. I thought Skyline's video was absolutely brilliant, and I wanted to just go into a little bit of detail in each of the phases, how you might go about doing these things in the lower ranks with quite often an uncoordinated team. Skyline's absolutely on the money on each of the phases and how they should work, but sometimes knowing how something should go and making something actually go that way are 2 different things. So I just kind of wanted to go into how you go about making these phases happen. So hopefully this will help you in your solo queue games. If there's any demand for it, I might go through one of my games with you and break down where each phase happens and what I've done and what my team's done to contribute to making that happen. So let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to subscribe for more content. Leave a like if you liked the video or a dislike if you didn't. But until next time, thanks for watching and cheers.